Obesity is now the biggest health crisis in the world. For the first time in history, children are facing shorter lives than their parents. We're eating poorly and we're getting fatter. It's a huge burden on the health system. What can we do?
Hi, I'm Simon Gold, and I'm a chef. I've had a life for food, eating, and I have loved every moment of it. But unfortunately, I've become large. So I'm now on a mission to find out, why are we fat?
In this series, I'll cut through the myths and uncover the facts about obesity and its effects. I'll talk to leading experts to see what causes the ever-increasing epidemic. And I've agreed to be a guinea pig. Using the latest cutting-edge science, I'll be poked and prodded, weighed and scanned.
Sounds freaky in here.
To see just how bad I am.
It actually says they're obese.
I'll get the latest nutritional advice and be put through the mill of intense exercise. So I can make change and improve my health for good.
It's the last time you get to see this fat body, because now I'm going to be working on it.
All in a bid to find out, why are we fat? When I was a kid, a fat person stuck out like a sore thumb. There weren't fat kids at school, and there were few overweight adults. But like me, New Zealanders have gotten fatter and fatter, and it has happened recently. Most of this weight has gone on progressively over the last 40 years, and now it is a serious health issue.
It's predicted that obesity is going to become our biggest health problem, and it's going to overtake smoking and smoking-related diseases. It's that big. We're the third fattest nation amongst developed countries. We're well up there, and our rates are staggering. 1 in 3 adults are obese. Half of all adult Māoris are obese. 2/3 of all Pacific Island adults are obese. These are monumental figures.
It's not just Kiwis who are suffering. Our neighbours across the Tasman are following a very similar trend.
The rates of obesity and diabetes in Australia are very high. So 2 in 3 males are either overweight or obese, and about 1 in 2 females. If you take into account all of the costs, including direct medical costs and indirect costs, it's about 15 billion a year.
It's an international phenomenon. There are now more fat people than skinny people in the world. Over the last 35 years, obesity rates have more than doubled, leading to a massive and rapid increase in heart disease, kidney and liver problems, high blood pressure and diabetes.
Diabetes was a virtually non-existent disease in the 19th century, even in the United States. The estimates of the percentage of the population that were diabetic was roughly, 1 in 10,000. Today, it's 1 in 11. If you believe our Centers for Disease Control, diabetes prevalence in the United States has increased 900% in the past 50 years. Obesity rates have increased about 250% since the early 1960s.
In 1980, the diabetes epidemic started in earnest, and it continues through today. And it's all because of the change in our diet from real food to processed food, low-fat processed food, high-sugar processed food. That's the nugget of truth of the last 40 years.
Like the rest of society, I wasn't always fat. I was pretty lean for the first 30 years of my life. But believe it or not, a crazy life working as a chef and restaurant owner meant I didn't always eat healthy myself, and I started to pack on the pounds. I wasn't happy with that, but a couple of years ago, the real bombshell came. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. That was a real wake-up call. I realised for the first time my bad habits were potentially killing me, and if I wanted to see my 2-year-old daughter grow up with a dad still in her life, then I needed to make a drastic change. For most of us, the word diabetes is just a word. But what does it really mean? I've come to San Francisco to meet kidney specialist Linda Frazzetto.
Diabetes is your blood sugar is high. Okay? And there's one type which is often genetic, and that's type 1 diabetes, where your pancreas is just not making enough insulin, and so you are insulin deficient. And therefore, the treatment for that is we give you insulin. The second type of diabetes is where the insulin is there, but it's not, your body cannot use the insulin very well, and that's called insulin resistance, and that's the kind of diabetes that we call type 2 diabetes.
I'm not alone. Type 2 diabetes rates have quadrupled, and 450 million other people around the world suffer the same condition, and it causes a huge range of medical problems.
Damage to the eyes, damage to the kidneys, damage to the heart, damage to the blood vessels, like in the brain, so that you get strokes, damage to the blood vessels in the hands and feet, so that you get this peripheral vascular disease. Depending on how bad your diabetes is and how long you've had it poorly controlled, we think it cuts 10 to 15 years off your life. I mean, if you end up with a heart attack so that your heart is really weak, if you end up with a stroke so that you're paralyzed on one side, I mean, you're not dead, but you're really sick now. I mean, if you're going to be alive, wouldn't you rather be healthy and alive?
Until now, I've never stopped and thought how damaging obesity was if left unchecked. It can lead to many more problems.
We used to think that obesity led to diabetes and heart disease, but the list grows longer. It's a major cause of liver disease and liver failure. The commonest cause of liver transplant now isn't alcoholism, it's obesity. It's associated with a whole range of different cancers. It's associated with Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline and impairment as we get older. Heart disease, strokes, joint diseases. Those who are very obese are less likely to be employed, are less likely to form relationships, will have fewer friends, will earn less as adults. There are lots of social negative connotations to those who are very obese.
Look at the garden. Look at the garden.
Now that I've heard what diabetes will do if I don't make a change, I'm ready to start my journey. My daughter needs her dad to stick around for the future, and he's got to do everything in his power to make sure he does. They say that every journey begins with a single step.
Simon, hi.
So I'm
William
stepping
Ferguson.
in to see
Yeah.
Dr. William
Have a seat.
Ferguson, who's putting me on the path to a healthier future. That's the plan anyway.
So I understand you've really put your body on the line for science here to see if we can really get a better understanding of your diabetes and your weight and things like that.
What I need you to do is fix me.
Okay, all right.
Firstly, William needs to work out my body mass index. So along with my weight,
92,
my height,
175.
and my flattering abs, I should know where I stand amongst the general population.
It says here your BMI is 31.0 and it actually says they're obese. But I think that's because you're just over 30. That's where the arbitrary definition of obesity is. You're 31, your BMI.
What's normal?
Normal is really 25, something like that. So we obviously need to get that down.
The next indignity to suffer is a blood test.
Get some blood off you today.
Do I look terrified?
Yes. Just relax. We're just going to see if we can pump up a vein.
This isn't the first time I've had blood taken, but on previous visits to the doctor, my veins were always, how can I put this, been a tad shy.
So you reckon they don't even have any luck on that arm?
Well, we can have
Shall
a
we
look.
just have a look?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I wish I had those veins that
Like
just
this?
poked out. Yeah, there you go. I hate needles.
Okay, what we might do is get our expert to come on in and just have a wee look, because I don't... Yeah.
Oh, this is a really great start. I hate needles. You can't see my veins.
Something I am more willing to part with is a few cells for a genetic test. And after a few more attempts, my veins reluctantly play ball.
We've had a couple of goes, but we've got it. And it's coming out, and I don't want to look at it at all.
These fluids will head off to the lab to be analysed, so the experts will know just how bad my situation is.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing the results.
Okay, great. See you, Simon.
See you, William. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm obese, but what does that really mean? I've come to Massey University to find out more.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, Simon. Nice to meet you.
Owen Muggeridge will get an accurate reading of just how much body fat I'm hauling around using this strange contraption, the bod pod.
How does the bod pod work?
Well, in a really simple way, a bit like when you get into a bath full of water, the volume of water is displaced by the same volume as your body. This uses the same principle, it uses air instead.
All right, well, why don't I hop into this futuristic machine and you send me into the future? What do I need to do?
Yep, just go to the toilet, get changed, we'll give you a little hat and we're good to go.
All righty, go for a pee. Every ounce is going to count. Okay, channel swim, here I come. Here we go.
See you.
2030, see you soon.
Okay, just about to start. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Where's the throttle?
The reading only takes a few minutes, but it's a strange experience. It feels more like some kind of ancient meditation chamber than a piece of cutting-edge scientific kit.
Sounds freaky in here.
Okay, Simon, come on in. The results are in. Have a seat.
Uh-oh. So how did I go?
So the bod pod has calculated your percentage body fat. The bod pod has said you're 40% fat, 40.0.
Holy shit.
So it's also given in kilograms, but if you look at this chart on the wall over here, you can see that it's put you into that over 30%, the risky category with high
Now,
body
off
fat.
the scale. Jeepers. Sounds like I've got, well, clearly I've got a heap of work to do. Wow, 40%. That's a lot of butter.
The next bit of space-age technology Owen straps me to is the DEXA, or Dual Energy X-ray Absorptometry, a scanning device which shows where all this fat is hiding.
So here you can see the outline of your body. Everything in yellow is the fat around the muscles, the red is the muscles, and the blue is the skeleton.
Not the prettiest picture in the world. There's clearly quite a lot of fat looking at that yellow that's sitting in the sort of tummy region, yeah? That's where I'm really, to me, that's where I'm carrying it on my thighs.
Yep, so next time we do the scan, hopefully a lot less of the yellow and more of the red.
All right, well, I've got a bit of work to do, and I'll see you in a few months. Hopefully less yellow.
That's right. Thanks very much, Simon.
Thanks, Owen.
See you again.
Oh, well, I guess I've got to be brutally honest. I'm absolutely gutted, you know. 40% of me is fat. I mean, I knew that I'm overweight, but 40% of my body is fat. That's nearly half of me is fat. So, yeah, I'm absolutely stunned, gutted. I've got a hell of a lot of work to do to change this, and yeah, I'm pretty scared about that, but I think I can do it, and I'm on a mission to do it, give it a go anyway.
Why have I and so many others become obese and got diabetes in such a short space of time? Have people been eating the wrong foods or just too much? What does science say?
In 1994, we learned about a hormone called leptin. And leptin is made by your fat cells and goes to your brain and tells your brain, you've had enough and you shouldn't eat so much. And for 50,000 years, leptin worked very well. And then it stopped working about 30, 40 years ago. And the question was, why? We knew that it wasn't because we weren't making enough leptin. We weren't leptin deficient, if anything. We were making too much leptin, but the leptin wasn't getting to the brain. That's called leptin resistance. The reason for leptin resistance is the hormone insulin. Insulin blocks the signal from leptin getting to the brain to tell you you've had enough. So then that fosters the next question. Okay, if insulin's the bad guy in the story, why is insulin now high? Why is insulin going up? Why do each of us release 2 to 4 times the amount of insulin today that we did, say, 40 years ago? And that I can sum up in one word: sugar.
Robert Lustig says we don't realise it, but we are all eating too much sugar. So how common is sugar? I decide to check out the shelves at the supermarket.
Nutrigrain, 4 health stars, source of protein and fibre. Well, this should be pretty good. First ingredient is cereals of wheat flour, oat flour, maize flour. Second ingredient, sugar. Tell you what, I've had a few of these in my time. Wheat Bix, I love them. But what's in here? First ingredient, whole grain wheat. Second ingredient, sugar. Cornflakes, pretty popular. Most people love them. First ingredient, corn. Second ingredient, sugar. Third ingredient, salt. Fourth ingredient, barley malt extract. Which is sugar.
No matter what the product, it seems sugar is in just about everything.
Just looking at mayonnaise here, per serve there's 3.2 grams of sugar. 4.3 grams, 5.3 grams, 7.8 grams, 13 grams of sugar, 15.5 grams of sugar. Wow, 48 grams of sugar. So basically, half of this bottle is sugar. Holy moly, that is a lot of sugar.
We consume triple to quadruple the amount of sugar per day that our body can actually metabolize rationally. We are overdosed. Of the 600,000 items in the grocery store, 74% of them are spiked with added sugar, added by the industry for its own purposes, not for yours. The fact is that the food industry knows that when they add it, you buy more, because they know that it's got an addictive quality to at least a percentage of the population.
The idea that sugar is addictive is very controversial, and in the nutrition world there's been this kind of idea that we're just rational human beings that choose to eat various foods, and some of us like sugar too much. But to me, my personal experience is that I was a sugar addict. In fact, if I go out and I have some sugar, I want more, and I want more and more and more. And I develop tolerance, and I feel these withdrawal symptoms. I get craving for it. I can't concentrate. I get restless. I get irritable. To me, it's a full-blown addiction.
Some scientists say sugar's a food. You can't be addicted to food because food's necessary for survival. But is sugar a food? Can you name me an energy source that is completely vestigial to human, animal, and any other life on this planet, and when consumed in excess, causes damage to your cells, to your organs, to your body, and shortens your lifespan, yet we love it anyway? And the answer is, oh yeah, you can. It's called alcohol. Alcohol is an energy source. Alcohol has calories, but it's not nutrition. Well, guess what? Sugar is an energy source. Sugar has calories, but it's not nutrition.
Sugar comes in many forms, some refined and some natural. In fact, there are more than 50 names for the sugar in our food. Table sugar, or sucrose, consists of two molecules, glucose and fructose. Glucose is the stuff in our blood that our body uses to power itself, but too much fructose is increasingly seen as a problem.
We used to think that fructose was good because it sounds good. It's commonly available in fruit. But a whole bunch of experiments, epidemiological studies, clinical studies, now show that fructose causes metabolic mayhem in the human body.
We have the innate capacity to metabolize fructose to a point. Once you get above that, the liver becomes overwhelmed, can't burn it faster than it's coming in. And so the liver has an escape valve where it turns it into liver fat. And then that liver fat has to be exported out as triglyceride, which can cause heart disease or also contribute to obesity. Or maybe it won't be exported out and will stay in the liver, and now you've got non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and you have the start of type 2 diabetes, hypertension. Your insulin goes up, that can drive cancer progression. And we now know that insulin resistance at the liver is at least associated, if not the cause of, dementia as well.
Sugar now dominates our diet. It's in bread, it's in orange juice, it's in sauces and cereals. How did so much sugar end up in our food? The answer is complex. In the 1960s, heart disease was a major concern for adult men in the developed world. British nutritionists like John Yudkin believed sugar was the cause, but one prominent American scientist had a different theory.
One of the key things that happened at that time was the famous 7 country studies by Ansel Keys. And Ansel actually set out to show that fat in the diet, and that was his belief, was the major cause of our problems, particularly heart disease and the cholesterol epidemic that he saw in the United States with people having very high cholesterol, atherosclerosis and so on.
In an extremely influential study, Keys presented data from 6 countries which showed a definite correlation between fat intake and heart disease.
He takes 6 countries and charts their heart disease rates versus their fat consumption. It's almost a perfect linear. The more fat they eat, the more heart disease they have.
But when data from more countries became available, the relationship between fat and heart disease is not so clear-cut.
It just tells you affluent countries have more heart disease than non-affluent countries. Western countries have more heart disease than non-Western countries.
Despite the inaccuracy of the data, Keys continued his campaign demonising fat, and his forceful personality drowned out competitors.
There was a battle between the British, Yudkin, who was saying, hey, sugar, it's pure, white and deadly, and Ansel Keys, who said saturated fat and fat in the diet, that's the problem. Keys won.
He starts convincing other people without ever having the evidence to support it. Suddenly, dietary fat's the problem. If you take the fat out of foods because you're worried about heart disease, then the question is, what are you going to do to replace the mouthfeel and replace the taste? And the easiest, cheapest way to do it is to use sugar, syrup. And now you've got something that's got almost the same amount of calories, and you've replaced the fat with sugar.
Sugar, along with starch and fibre, are carbohydrates. In the 1960s, carbohydrates were thought to be healthy because they have less than half the calories per gram as fat. As the low-fat mantra started to gain traction, experts pushed a new message: fat is out, carbs are in.
By 1970, the American Heart Association is telling every American over the age of 2, old enough to walk, off his mother's breast, to eat a low-fat, high-carb diet. And by the 1980s, the idea that carbohydrates were fattening has been transformed into the carbohydrate as heart-healthy diet food. And even the American Heart Association is recommending in brochures that we replace fat-rich snacks with sugared candies, because sugar doesn't have fat in it.
In the early 1990s, the US Department of Agriculture created the food pyramid. At the very top was the food we were told to eat the least of: fats, oils, and eventually even sugar. And at the bottom, the foods which we were told to eat the most of: bread, cereals, rice, and pasta. It all seems like good advice, right? Well, not quite.
The USDA pyramid that was developed around that time had at its base grain foods as something that should be the basis of our diet, the biggest part of our diet. And it didn't really specify what sort of grain food or in what form, because us nutritionists know they can be very different. We now understand the terms of low GI versus high GI. And many of the grain foods that they were recommending to people at that time were very high GI foods.
So what are high GI foods? I've come to talk with Professor Jenny Brand-Miller and her team at the University of Sydney. They run a lab that tests the GI of various foods. GI, or glycemic index, is a measure of how quickly a food spikes our blood sugar. Foods containing different types of carbohydrates are prepared and fed to test subjects. And what do you know? Subject 007 has just arrived.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, well, thanks, Simon. So we'll just get your fasting blood glucose measure here. So we'll start off just by giving a quick alcohol wipe.
First part of the process is to extract a little blood, and thankfully this time, no veins are needed.
So just a little prick of the finger. And we're just going to get a nice big drop of blood, because we want one nice big drop of blood. And
The blood sample is then tested for glucose and a baseline blood sugar reading is established. From there, I sit down with the other subjects for a yummy carbohydrate lunch. In my case, dry white bread.
Bread with no butter, no nothing on is really not very interesting.
All the foods that we eat are made up of three main macronutrients: carbohydrate, fat, and protein. And some foods have got very high proportions of carbohydrates, and that's what you've got round the table here. And they make up the biggest proportion of calories in most people's diets, carbohydrate foods. The Bergen bread is a low GI bread, and if we gave you a low GI meal for breakfast, lunch and dinner, it would follow that blue curve. If I gave you a normal wholemeal bread, then it follows that red line. And I think it's pretty clear that this blue one is what you want to see.
Back in the lab, the test subjects that were given the high glycemic foods are retested, and as expected, their blood glucose levels have risen. The whole point of the experiment is to establish a glycemic index for each food.
The glycemic index is just a tool, a measuring tape, which sums up how much a carbohydrate in different foods is influencing blood glucose levels after we've eaten them. So it's a scale. The foods that are above 70 on this scale, we call them high glycemic index foods. On the other end of the scale, we've got foods called low glycemic index foods, and they are more slowly digested and absorbed.
Looking at the glycemic index, it's apparent that many of the foods with high GI are the ones that dominate our diet today. When you eat high GI foods all the time, it means that there are constantly high levels of glucose in your blood. In time, this causes major damage to the body.
Some cells in the body, they just can't control the uptake of glucose into their cells. Those cells include the cells in the eye, in the kidneys, in the blood vessels, the lining of the blood vessels. So you're setting the scene for blood clots and hardening of the arteries. Eventually, those cells just start to die. And if that happens to our beta cells, the beta cells that produce insulin, then our beta cell mass starts to contract and we're no longer capable of producing all the insulin we need to. And when that happens, we eventually get a diagnosis of diabetes.
Over 400 million people, including myself, have diabetes. More than 10,000 people die every day from diabetes and its related complications. Is 50 years of bad nutritional advice part of the problem?
There was a real zealotry about trying to prove this hypothesis that animal fat was causing us to get sick with heart disease. And we've seen an enormous amount of resource go into that, but the numbers have been frustratingly resistant to showing that that's the case.
Although there's still a lot of controversy about whether fat, especially saturated fat, is good or bad for us, the tide may be turning.
Imagine the American Heart Association announcing that they made a mistake. And the press release that says to the American public and the world, by the way, when we told you to eat low-fat, high-carb diets for the past 50 years, we were wrong. We apologize if we killed some of you or some of your relatives or loved ones. We apologize. It was an honest mistake. Now we got it right. Now we're credible. Now you can trust us. It's a no-win situation.
Much of the food we eat today contains lots of different ingredients, combined together in lots of different ways. Whether it's added sugar or added fat, almost all of these foods have been altered in some way. I want to know if ordinary people are aware of what they're buying when they're out shopping.
Oh, we're not even in the shop and you guys have bought badness.
I know.
Come on, what are we going to get?
Meet the Vercos, your typical suburban New Zealand family. I've come along on their usual weekly grocery shop in a bid to see what kind of food they're buying.
We want an iceberg lettuce? Okay.
Keen to make a good first impression, the Vercos go a little overboard on the fruit and vegetables.
Man, what are you going to do with all those onions? You've got a bag of onions and a bag of onions.
Then it's off to the meat section to grab some lamb, chicken and steak, some full-fat milk and a couple of loaves of bread.
Go for the multigrain.
Is that what you guys normally have, the multigrain?
Yeah.
All pretty standard stuff, but it's what's coming up next where temptation starts.
Okay, here comes the naughty section, the frozen ice cream section. We're having boysenberry, do we all agree?
Boysenberry.
No, so we've got a no, and how many yeses have we got?
This one, it's chocolate.
Yeah, how about we do jelly tip, because we all like jelly tip.
Jelly tip.
Uh-oh.
If the boys are picking the ice cream, then I'm picking the seasoning. And wouldn't you know it, the Simon Galt home cuisine range is on special.
This is where you get your flavouring
yes.
for your steak.
Yes. And what
So,
do you recommend?
Well, either the Kiwi or the Italian or the Moroccan is pretty good. It'd be pretty good on those steaks that you're going to cook on the barbie.
What the Vercos don't know is that I'm actually looking at how much processed food they buy. Processed food makes up almost 80% of what's available in your average supermarket. And when you get down to it, many of these products contain at least one of only 3 core ingredients, and none of them have any nutritional value.
Basically, the 3 commodities that food companies used in large amounts, because they're very cheap, to make this huge range of processed foods available to the public are basically refined starch from grains, whether it be corn, soy, wheat, barley, oats, rice, sugar, usually refined sugar, either from cane sugar, which is sucrose, or high fructose corn syrup, which they extract and make from excess corn that's grown, particularly in the US. And the third major commodity is cheap vegetable oils.
Combining these high-calorie, low-nutrient ingredients creates processed food, but it's the ultra-processed variety which dominates our modern diet.
Ultra-processed food is a specific level of processing where a lot has happened to the food, and it's basically not at all recognizable to the food it was originally. So, for example, you have cereals or biscuits, chocolate and those kind of foods. That's not something that grows in nature, so a lot of processes have been applied to make that product.
Processing food alters it in many ways.
Heating gets rid of all the vitamin C in a product. but also often a lot of additives are added. So for example, sugar and fat and salt and refined oils, they are added to these ultra-processed foods, making them very energy dense and also not very nutritious.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the Vircos are continuing their shop and the boys are now making all the decisions.
That's what you like?
It's what they like.
Bodies?
And they can go through litres of it.
Really?
Yeah.
How much sauce do you ketchup do you go through?
We can go
they could easily do one of those in a week.
With the grocery shop thankfully almost done, the Vircos just need to decide which cereal to buy.
Do we want Wheat Bix Bites this week?
Wheat Bix Bites.
But it might not really matter, as apparently they're all exactly the same.
In our study, we found there's more than 200 or close to 300 different types of breakfast cereal, but they're basically all variations of the same products. So it's the same kind of grains in there, and lots of sugar and lots of syrups in those products. And often they're also made by the same manufacturers. So it looks like there's a lot of variety, but basically it's all the same products.
Back at Virco HQ, we've separated the groceries into two camps. And when you add it up, the processed food makes up 60% of the total shop, which is pretty typical. But what's wrong with processed food? After all, it's cheap, convenient, and addictively tasty.
They have a monotonous diet.
Yeah. I've come back to California to meet Dr. Aaron Blaisdell, who has been testing the effects of processed food on rats.
I mean, Aaron, I never thought I'd say this, but they actually look quite cute.
Well, they are.
I mean, I've always thought rats, ooh, but like, they're kind of cute. So tell me, what are you doing with these rats?
Well, I want to study obesity and then how that affects cognition.
So, tell me, how does it work with these guys? What do you do?
Well, I get different rats. They're all the same type of rat. Some of them are put on these kind of relatively natural diet. So this is a food pellet made from just grinding up fish meal and wheat and corn, things like that. And it's actually quite nutritious for a rat. And then I have another group of rats that eats a very similar type of pellet, but made of highly refined ingredients. So what this allows us to do is to compare a healthy diet to a processed diet.
And so what's the difference?
Well, the difference is that the ones on the healthy diet stay healthy, lean, and smart. The ones on the processed food diet, they get fat, they get obese, and they even started accumulating tumors very quickly, and they started dying.
These two rats in here, you're slim, healthy guys. How big did the rat that got fat and died get?
Well, I could show you so you can see for yourself. Right here is a picture I took of the two side by side. Wow. And you see that the fat one is obese. I mean, bulging at the sides, and the lean one looks like these girls.
When they get morbidly obese like that, do they get diabetes?
They did. It was crazy. We didn't expect it. We weren't measuring it from the blood, but we noticed that the urine, it was sweet. So they were obviously pissing out sugar. They were diabetic.
You've shown what the different diets do in rats. How does it affect humans, us, on a day-to-day basis?
Well, there's not really much difference between a human and a rat in terms of our physiology. The way a bad diet affects my rats is really the same way a bad diet affects us. We're not just getting fat, we're losing our mental functions, our ability to pay attention, our ability to work, and we're starting to get tumors and cancers at a higher rate and dying younger. Then the implications for society are quite severe, and we need to do something now to address that.
Processed food makes up much of our modern diet, and it is contributing to the obesity and diabetes epidemic. If this stuff is bad for rats, then it's definitely bad for us. Okay, I'm fat. Putting on weight is bad enough, but where the fat is also important. The worst kind of fat is visceral fat. That's the internal fat stored around vital organs, and it's a key factor in obesity and diabetes. I've come to the University of Auckland Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences to see how much of my fat is visceral fat. Normally MRI machines are reserved for cancer patients, so I'm extremely fortunate to be allowed to use this one to scan for body fat. But I'm really nervous. Not only do I hate small spaces, but being bombarded with radiation doesn't fill me with confidence either.
Ready?
All right, see you later.
Can you hear me okay? That's great. So there's just a short burst of noise for the first one.
The test is being overseen by Rachel Heron and Professor Jun Lu.
Breathe in, breathe out, stop breathing.
And a series of scans are performed providing detailed images of my insides, although I'm not sure I want to hear the results.
Okay, are you ready for the result?
I don't know if I want to be ready. How bad is it?
So you can see all the white bits are the fat. And so...
Is that normal or a normal amount of fat?
You can see it swamped by white. And all the black ones all the white bits are the fat. But, you know, between the space, you have massive amount of fat.
Slide after slide reveals a litany of organs in serious trouble. It is unwelcome and upsetting news for me. All I want to do is run home and curl up on the couch with some ice cream. But I'm afraid that will just make things worse.
So turn it into numerical. Here's the result. You can't even see anything. It's just pitch black. But for you, it's quite a lot. And that's where you can see from your liver fat, and this is the water peak, and that's the fat peak. You can see it's already there. So turn it into, which is 10.84%. It's huge. And a normal person, the highest tolerate, fat can be in the pancreas is about 7%. And then you are reaching 10.84. And in the end, 33.7% of fat in your liver. That's phenomenal. That means 1/3 of your liver contains fat. So it's compromising your liver function.
I'm a fat bastard. Yes, I can see I'm fat, but you look in here and 33.7% of my liver is fat.
Yes, it is really, really bad. But there is hope. And metabolic disease, like type 2 diabetes, is one type of disease. If you determine enough not to have it, you can not to have it.
So I've actually got to get off my ass and do something about this to make some change that can get rid of my diabetes and mean I can live longer.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know whether I want to talk to you much more.
Well, maybe see me in 3 months.
I never want to see you again, but I will come back in 3 months.
Okay, great.
Without doubt, the most shocking news of my life. To be told that 33+% of my liver is fat. Holy. I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I've clearly got a lot of work and a lot of change to do. I've got 3 months. They're going to look at me again. But, do I want to have my foot cut off? Do I want to lose my kidney, liver, and ultimately die from a heart attack? That's the way I'm heading.